I never thought I'd come home from a simple 2-week trip and find my whole life scattered across the front lawn like garbage. My sweaters, my shoes, even my wedding album, the one with the frayed leather cover, dumped carelessly in damp cardboard boxes. A pair of my stockings hung from a bush, fluttering like some cruel little flag, and there, perched right on top, was a note. "Sorry, Mom, my wife's parents are moving in. No space left for you." At first, I laughed, a short, brittle laugh that broke halfway out of my throat. This had to be a mistake, a sick joke. I grabbed my keys and rushed to the door. The locks were changed. I banged on the door so hard my knuckles burned. "Matthew, open this door right now. This isn't funny." Silence. Then footsteps. My son's voice came from behind the door, muffled but cold. "It's better this way, Mom. We needed the space. Please don't make this harder." Harder? Through the window, I saw her, Emily, his wife. She was standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, a smirk, twisting her perfect little mouth. I slapped my hand against the glass. "Emily, please, can we talk? I've nowhere else to go. Just 5 minutes, that's all I ask." She didn't answer. She just pulled the curtain shut. I stood there for what felt like hours. The neighbors peeked through their blinds, their curious little eyes tracking every move as I knelt in the grass to gather what I could. My nightgown, the one I wore after my surgery, was soaking wet. The framed photo of Matthew as a toddler slipped from my trembling hands and cracked on the pavement. No one came to help. As I loaded the last box into my car, the lump in my throat finally gave way. Tears blurred the driveway as I gripped the steering wheel and whispered to myself, "They think they've won. They think they've taken everything." But they didn't know about the little apartment across town, the one they laughed at when I signed the lease years ago, the one they didn't know I kept just in case. As I drove away, I didn't look back, not once. They don't know what I've kept hidden, but they're about to find out. I couldn't stop shaking. Even as I drove, my hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles burned white. Every time I blinked, I saw Matthew at 5 years old, running barefoot through the yard, his cheeks flushed with joy as he yelled, "Wait for me, Mommy, wait!" I remembered how he clung to me after his first nightmare, his tiny fingers twisted in my nightgown as he whispered, "Don't leave me, okay?" And now, 27 years later, he had left me. No, not just left me. Thrown me out like trash. The words on that note burned like acid in my mind. "Sorry, Mom. My wife's parents are moving in. No space left for you. No space for the woman who raised him. No space for the woman who paid off the last of his student loans after his father died. No space for the woman who signed the deed of her own house over to help him feel secure in the years after his marriage. I had done that because I trusted him, because I believed in family." The rain started falling harder, streaking the windshield in long, blurry trails. I turned on the wipers and whispered to myself, "Don't you dare cry again." I didn't want my tears to blind me. Not now. Not when I still had a key they didn't know about. It took 20 minutes to get there. The little apartment was across town, tucked above an old bakery that smelled faintly of sugar and yeast. I'd signed the lease 6 years ago, right after Emily moved in, and started redecorating my home like she owned it. Matthew had laughed when he found out. "Mom, why would you waste money on some tiny place you'll never use? You live with us now." But I had kept it. Quietly. Patiently. Something in my gut had told me I might need an escape one day. And now, that day had come. I parked behind the bakery, grabbed the only suitcase I'd managed to cram into the car, and climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. My key slid in smoothly. The door opened to the faint smell of lavender. It was small, modest, but it was mine. I set the suitcase down and sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the faded curtains as my whole body trembled, not from the cold, but from humiliation. They'd laughed at me as I stood in the rain. When I'd begged Matthew to open the door, I'd heard Emily's voice from inside, sharp and cutting. "Don't let her guilt you, Matt. She'll never leave if you do." And he hadn't. He hadn't even said goodbye. For years, I had blamed myself for the tension between Emily and me. I told myself she was just young, just stressed, just trying to build her life. So I kept giving. I handed over the house deed after Matthew asked, said it was for safety. I co-signed their car loan when Emily's credit wouldn't qualify, and each time I told myself, it's fine, this is what mothers do. But now I could see it clearly. They hadn't been building a family, they'd been building walls to shut me out. The silence in the apartment pressed in on me. I took a deep breath, pulled my purse onto my lap, and reached into the side pocket. The folder was still there. Inside was the original deed, the one with only my name on it. The transfer Matthew and Emily had so smugly celebrated wasn't what they thought. They didn't know I'd kept a clause they hadn't bothered to read, because they assumed I'd be too soft to ever fight back. I let out a long, shaky breath and whispered to the empty room, "You think you've won, but you don't know me at all." For years, I had been the quiet one, the agreeable one, the mother who baked birthday cakes, wrote checks, and never asked for anything back. But something cracked in me tonight. I wasn't soft anymore. And if they thought locking me out meant I'd roll over and disappear, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Tomorrow, I would make my first call. To Peter Holloway, the lawyer Emily said I'd never need. The next morning, I sat in my little kitchen, staring at the steam curling from my untouched coffee. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matthew's silhouette behind the door, refusing to let me in. And Emily's voice, soft but venomous, echoed in my mind. "Don't let her guilt you, Matt. She'll never leave if you do." I thought nothing could hurt worse than standing in the rain, my belongings soaking in the grass, as they shut me out of my own home. I was wrong. Because now, in the cold light of morning, the truth settled heavy in my chest. They weren't sorry. Not Matthew. Not Emily. They had planned this. And they expected me to fade quietly, to accept my place outside their perfect little world. But I wasn't fading. I crossed the room to the small cabinet by the window and pulled out the folder I'd hidden years ago. Inside were all the documents that mattered, the original deed, the trust agreement, and, most importantly, the clause Matthew and Emily never bothered to read. They thought they'd tricked the old woman into signing her rights away, but they were wrong. As I tucked the folder into my bag, a strange calm settled over me. Let them think they've won. While they were busy redecorating my house and bragging about their victory, I'd been quietly preparing my first strike. And when it came, it wouldn't be loud or messy. It would be devastating. "You wanted space, Matthew? You're about to get more of it than you ever imagined." I reached for my phone and scrolled to the name I hadn't dialed in years. "Peter Holloway," he answered on the second ring. "Margaret," he said warmly, like no time had passed. "It's been ages. To what do I owe the—" "My son and his wife locked me out of my house," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I need to know exactly how much power I still hold." There was a pause on his end. "Where are you right now?" he asked carefully. "In my apartment." "Good. Stay there. Bring that folder with you. We'll meet today." "Peter," I said softly, my fingers tightening on the phone, "I don't want revenge. I just want my life back." "And you're going to get it," he said firmly. "They've underestimated you. Let's show them why that was a mistake." It took him less than an hour to arrive. I heard the knock and opened the door to find him standing there in his press suit, rain beating on his overcoat. He hadn't changed much. His sharp eyes still held that calm, calculating kindness I remembered from years ago. "Margaret," he looked me over, taking in my rumpled cardigan, the bags under my eyes. "They did something, didn't they?" I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the small kitchen table, the folder between us. "They locked me out," I said simply. "Told me they needed the house for her parents. My things were on the lawn when I came back." Peter's jaw tightened. "Did you sign anything recently? Any new documents?" I shook my head. "No, but years ago I added Matthew to the deed. He said it was for safety." I pushed the folder toward him. "But I kept this, the original paperwork, and the clause at the bottom." He opened it and read carefully. When he looked up, There was a glint in his eye I hadn't seen before. "Margaret," he said slowly, "they don't own that house. You do. Full stop." My breath hitched. "What?" "The clause you kept here. The transfer was conditional. You retained full rights to revoke it at any time." They clearly never read this properly. He tapped the paper with his pen. "You can evict them tomorrow if you want. Hell, you can sell the house from under them." I sat back, my heart pounding. "I don't want revenge," I whispered. I don't want to be treated like I don't matter." Peter nodded. "This isn't revenge. It's reclamation." A silence settled over the room. "Margaret," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "I've seen people like Emily before. They think kindness is weakness. They count on people like you staying quiet." "Not anymore," I said, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. Peter smiled faintly. "Good. Let's get started then." As we went over the paperwork, I felt a strange lightness building in my chest. They thought they had taken everything, but they forgot one thing. I built that house, and I can take it back. Tomorrow, Peter would file the first set of papers, and Matthew, my son, would soon learn that locking me out was the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the heaviness in my chest hadn't. I stared at my phone for nearly an hour before finally dialing Matthew's number. My hand hovered over the screen, my thumb trembling. This wasn't a call for reconciliation. It was a test to see if there was any shred of the boy I raised left in him, or if Emily had smothered it completely. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. "Mom?" His voice was cautious, almost annoyed. "Matthew." I forced my tone to sound soft, hesitant. I just wanted to say I'm not angry anymore." There was a pause. "I don't understand," he said slowly. I said, swallowing hard. "I forgive you. For everything. I just want us to talk. Maybe I could come by later today? We can figure things out." Another long silence. I thought I heard him exhale. Then, faintly, Emily's voice cut through in the background. "Who is it?" "It's my mom," Matthew said, his voice low. "What does she want?" Emily snapped. "She says she wants to come over, that she forgives us." There was a sharp, derisive laugh from Emily, so loud I could hear every word through the phone. "Don't let her guilt you again, Matt. Don't you get it? She'll ruin everything we've built here. She's not coming back." "Emily," Matthew started. "No, she made her choice when she left. You don't owe her anything. This is our house now. Our family. Our family." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my nails digging into my palm as if the pain could ground me. "Okay," Matthew said finally, his voice subdued. "I'll tell her." "Tell her now," Emily hissed. "Mom?" His tone shifted, colder this time. "Yeah, it's really not a good time for a visit. Things are hectic here." I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "I understand," I said softly. "I just wanted you to know I still love you." "Yeah, sure." And then the line went dead. I lowered the phone to the table, staring at the dark screen. I had my answer. For years I'd bent over backward to keep peace in that house. I forgave every snide remark Emily threw my way, every time Matthew brushed off my concerns with, "That's just how she is, Mom." But this wasn't just Emily. This was Matthew, too. My son. The boy who used to beg me for one more bedtime story. The boy who cried when I dropped him off at kindergarten. The boy who promised, "When I'm grown up, I'll take care of you, Mommy." That boy was gone. And in his place stood a man who stood silently as his wife locked me out of my own home. I sat in the little kitchen of my apartment, staring at the folder Peter had left on the counter. The clause was still there. The power was still mine. I closed my eyes and whispered, "All right. I'm done being the forgiving one." If Matthew and Emily thought I was weak, if they thought I would fade into the background while they enjoyed the fruits of my labor, they were about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be calling them, I'd be calling the realtor. And while they hosted their little garden parties and bragged about their home, they'd have no idea it was already slipping out of their hands. The next morning, I stood by the window of my little apartment, staring out at the bakery's back alley. The air smelled faintly of sugar and rain, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were miles away, on my house, my garden, my life, the one Emily was probably redecorating at this very moment. I didn't cry this time. There were no tears left to give them. Instead, I opened my phone and dialed Peter. "Margaret," he said, his tone brisk but warm. "Ready?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "Do it. File the sale paperwork." A pause. Then, quietly, "You're sure?" "They've already taken everything from me," I said. "It's time I take something back." "All right," he said. "Consider it done." I ended the call and exhaled slowly, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. 2 days later, I drove past my old neighborhood. I shouldn't have done it. I knew seeing the house would hurt, but some part of me needed to look, to remind myself why I was doing this. And there they were. Emily stood in the garden in her pristine white sundress, a glass of wine in hand, laughing too loudly at something her father said. Matthew was setting up chairs on the lawn while Emily's mother fussed over flower arrangements. A garden party. I pulled over just far enough to watch without being seen. Emily gestured toward the house with a wide sweep of her arm. "Isn't it lovely?" she said, her voice carrying across the lawn. "It's practically ours now. I told Matt we should knock down that ugly wall in the kitchen and open the space up. It's wasted potential otherwise." Her father nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. And once it's officially yours, you can take out a line of credit against it. Fix it up proper." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. "Officially yours?" They really thought they'd won. Emily's laugh cut through the warm summer air like a blade. "That woman should be grateful we didn't send her to a nursing home." I swear, Matt and I are too soft sometimes. Grateful. That word burned hotter than any insult. They didn't see me parked on the side street, watching as Emily clinked her glass with her guests, smiling like the queen of a kingdom she didn't build. I imagined her face when the letter arrived, when she realized her little kingdom was nothing more than a house of cards. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "Not for long, Emily. Not for long." I started the car and drove away, the hum of the engine drowning out the sound of their laughter. By this time next week, that laughter would be gone. The house was on the market. They didn't know it yet, but the clock was ticking, and when the walls came crashing down, I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. 3 days later, Emily got her first hint that her little empire was crumbling. Peter called me that morning. "It's done," he said. "The eviction notice has been served. They'll know by this afternoon." "Thank you," I whispered. "Are you ready for the fallout?" he asked gently. "They taught me how to survive it," I said, and I meant it. By evening, my phone exploded with calls. Matthew's number flashed on the screen first. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Mom!" he shouted. No greeting, no hesitation, just anger crackling down the line. "What the hell is this? You can't just throw us out of the house. This is my family's home." His family. I almost laughed. "Matthew," I said calmly, "it's my home. You don't own it. You never did." "Don't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "We'll figure something out." "But you can't." Before he could finish, I heard Emily snatch the phone from his hand. "You've lost your mind, haven't you?" she hissed. "I'm taking back what's mine," I replied evenly. "You think you're so clever. You think you're strong enough to take us on? Listen to me, you bitter old woman. Back down now, or we'll ruin you. Do you understand?" Her voice was sharp, almost frantic now. "You've done enough already," I said. "I suggest you pack." "You're making a mistake," Emily screamed. "You'll regret this." I let a small smile creep across my face. "Not as much as you're about to." Then I ended the call. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the one who kept peace, who swallowed every insult, who convinced herself family meant sacrifice. But Emily's voice, so raw, so panicked, echoed in my ears like music. She thought she could intimidate me, that I'd crumble. She didn't know yet that her threats had no weight. This time, the law was on my side. This time, I wasn't alone. As I set my phone down on the kitchen counter, a strange calm settled over me. They thought I'd be their stepping stone forever. But they were about to learn what happens when you use a stepping stone as a foundation. It crumbles, and I was going to make sure they felt every crack. It didn't take long for Matthew and Emily to strike back. 2 days after the eviction notice was served, Peter called me with a warning. "They're filing a counterclaim," he said. "They're arguing you're mentally unfit to manage your own property." I let out a low, humorless laugh. Mentally unfit? They're painting a picture of confusion, poor memory, and erratic behavior. They'll try to prove you're incompetent to block the sale. I closed my eyes and gripped the edge of the table. Emily. Of course this was her doing. This wasn't Matthew's idea. He'd never been clever enough for such cruelty. Peter's voice softened. "Margaret, this isn't unusual in cases like this. But don't worry, we can fight it. And I think it's time we bring in reinforcements." The next afternoon, I sat in the corner booth of a quiet cafe, my hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea as I waited. I wasn't alone for long. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked 2 men who couldn't have been more different. First came Henry Webb, a retired judge and an old friend of my late husband. His sharp gaze swept the room until it landed on me, and his expression softened. "Margaret," he said warmly, taking my hand in his. "Cliff would have had a thing or two to say about all this, you know. Cliff always said people show their true colors when they think you're too tired to fight back," I murmured. Henry's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, "and they're about to see yours." Behind him came David Holloway, Peter's cousin and a financial advocate for seniors. A tall man with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority. He slid into the seat across from me. "You've got quite the case, Mrs. Grant," David said. "I've reviewed every document Peter sent. Your son and his wife don't have a legal leg to stand on." "They don't need one," I said quietly. "They'll try to destroy my name instead. And that's where we come in." Henry's voice was calm, but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "We're not just going to defend you. We're going to dismantle their smear campaign piece by piece." Later that evening, back in my apartment, I stared at the folder on my table. Inside were affidavits from my doctors confirming my mental fitness, notarized statements from neighbors about Emily's behavior, and a letter Henry had written to the court himself. It was all coming together. They thought their lies would be enough to keep me quiet, that they could humiliate me into disappearing. But I wasn't disappearing. For years, I let them chip away at my pride. Every time Emily rolled her eyes, every time Matthew said, "Mom, you're imagining things." Every time they made me feel small in my own home. Not anymore. This time, I wasn't fighting for their love. I was fighting for my dignity. When Peter called that night, his voice was steady, but laced with satisfaction. "The court sided with you, Margaret. You have full authority to sell the house. And if you want to, we can proceed with eviction immediately." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Emily's smirk flashed in my mind. The way she clinked glasses at her garden party, bragging about how I should be grateful. Grateful? I tightened my grip on the phone. "Do it," I said. "Proceed." "All right." Peter paused. "You're almost there. Just hold steady." I hung up and sat in silence, staring out the window at the darkened street. They thought I was weak. They thought they could erase me with whispers and signatures. But the papers were signed now. And the house, the one I built with Cliff, the one they tried to claim as their own, was mine again. Tomorrow, the realtor would return for a final appraisal. And Matthew and Emily? They'd never see it coming. The next morning, I stood in the window of my little apartment, watching the sunlight stream through thin curtains. Today was the day. Peter had arranged for the realtor to do the final appraisal. By evening, the house I built brick by brick with Cliff would officially be on the market. I sipped my tea slowly, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just about property. This was about respect. This was about taking back everything they thought they had quietly stolen. By noon, my phone rang. Matthew's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" His voice cracked like a whip, loud, sharp, and panicked. "Selling my property," I said calmly. "You don't own it. You never did. Don't do this," he said, his voice trembling now. "It's not fair. We've built our lives there. Emily's parents have moved in. You can't just—" I cut him off, my voice like steel. "Matthew, Do you remember when I begged you to open that door? Do you remember standing there letting your wife lock me out of my own home?" "Mom, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said. "You threw me away because you thought I had nothing left to fight with. But you forgot one thing. I raised you in that house. It's mine. And I am taking it back." There was a sharp intake of breath on his end. In the background, I heard Emily's voice rise into a shriek. "She can't do this. Tell her she can't do this." "She's insane." "I can hear her," I said coolly. "You tell Emily she should start packing." "You're being cruel," Matthew yelled. "You're destroying this family." My hands didn't even shake. "No, Matthew," I said softly. "You destroyed this family the moment you left me standing in the rain, and then I ended the call. For years, I'd let them chip away at me. Every sigh, every eye roll, every quiet little act of disrespect, I absorbed it all, because I thought it was easier to keep the peace than to stand my ground. But peace built on fear isn't peace at all. It's a prison. And I wasn't their prisoner anymore. An hour later, Peter texted me, "Appraisal complete. Realtor says it'll move fast. You ready to list?" "Do it," I replied. As I set my phone down, I imagined Emily in my kitchen, pacing the floor, her voice hoarse from shouting. I pictured her parents, the ones she'd thrown me out to make room for, staring as their plans fell apart piece by piece. And Matthew standing there in silence, finally realizing the cost of choosing comfort over his own mother. I walked over to the window and looked out at the world beyond the glass. For the first time in years, I felt light. They thought I was powerless. They thought I would fade quietly into the background. But they were wrong. By this time next month, the house would belong to someone else. And Matthew and Emily? They'd have no choice but to leave, with their boxes, their plans, and their entitlement in tatters. 2 days after the house went on the market, my phone didn't stop buzzing. I didn't answer, not when Matthew called 5 times in a row, not when Emily left a voicemail, her voice rising from sweetly pleading to venomous in less than 30 seconds. They didn't deserve my voice anymore. Instead, I sat in my little apartment, the sunlight pooling on the floor like honey, and watched everything unfold quietly from afar. The security system Cliff and I had installed years ago, long before Emily came into the picture, still worked. They didn't know I still had remote access. I watched them through the cameras like ghosts. Emily pacing the living room, her hair mussed and her face twisted with fury. Matthew sitting on the edge of the couch, his head in his hands. In the background, Emily's parents stood stiffly by the kitchen counter, their voices rising as they argued with Emily. "You said this house was secure," her father snapped. "She can't just take it back. This is fraud," Emily shouted, her hands flailing in the air. "No, sweetheart," her mother said sharply. "This isn't fraud. This is you being sloppy." Emily turned on Matthew like a predator cornered. "You said she signed everything over? You said she was too soft to fight back." "I thought she was," Matthew muttered, his voice barely audible. "Thought? You ruined everything. My parents are here. We've invested in renovations. We own this place." "No," I whispered to myself, my voice calm and steady as I watched her unravel on the screen. "You never owned it. You only borrowed it." Later that afternoon, Peter called with an update. "They've hired a lawyer," he said, "but it's too little, too late. The court already ruled in your favor. They can't touch the house, and they can't stop the sale." I smiled faintly. "And the eviction?" "Still moving forward," Peter confirmed. "They have 30 days to vacate. If they refuse, we can have them legally removed." "Good," I said softly. That evening, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window of my apartment. The air felt lighter somehow. For years, I had walked on eggshells in my own home, careful not to upset Emily's delicate sensibilities, careful not to make Matthew choose between his wife and his mother. And still, they'd chosen to discard me the moment I wasn't useful anymore. Now it was their turn to feel small. I imagined Emily standing in my garden, yelling into her phone, the neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains, and I didn't feel guilt, not anymore. They thought they could erase me with silence and signatures. They thought I'd fade away, But instead, I had become the storm they never saw coming. Tomorrow, I knew they'd show up at my apartment. They'd come, fists pounding on my door, voices shaking with desperation, and I would be ready. The knock on my apartment door wasn't polite. It was frantic, heavy, the kind of pounding you feel in your bones. I didn't move at first. I let them knock again and again, each thud louder, more desperate. "Mom, open up!" Matthew's voice. "Margaret, we know you're in there." Emily's shrill tone cut through the door like broken glass. I set down my tea, stood slowly, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Matthew's face was pale, his hair disheveled like he hadn't slept. Emily clutched his arm, her jaw tight and her eyes darting nervously down the hall. I unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see them clearly. They weren't ready for how calm I looked. "Mom," Matthew said, forcing a smile. "Please, can we talk? We've been trying to call you." "I know," I said evenly. Emily stepped forward. "You can't do this. You can't just sell the house. Where are we supposed to go? My parents are living there now." "You should have thought about that," I said, "before you put my belongings on the lawn." Matthew's mouth opened, but no words came out. Emily, however, had no such hesitation. "This isn't fair. You're punishing us for one mistake. We're family. Families forgive each other." I tilted my head slightly. "Do you remember when I stood in the rain, begging you to open the door?" Neither of them answered. "Do you remember what you said, Matthew?" He stared at the floor. "You said it was better this way. You said you needed your space." "Mom, please?" "No." My voice didn't rise, but the word was heavy enough to make him flinch. "You already did this to me," I said softly, each word deliberate. "Now it's your turn." Emily's face twisted, her voice cracking. "We'll fight this!" "You think you're so clever, but you can't just erase us." I met her gaze calmly. "You erased me first." And with that, I closed the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like the final note in a long, bitter symphony. On the other side, I heard Emily's voice rising in panic. "Matt, do something! She can't get away with this!" Matthew said nothing. I walked back to my chair, picked up my tea, and stared out the window as the sound of their footsteps faded down the hall. For the first time in years, I felt free. They thought this was over, but this was just the beginning. It didn't take long for them to send reinforcements. The next morning, there was another knock on my apartment door, this one quieter but sharper, the kind of knock that wasn't asking permission so much as demanding compliance. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. Emily's parents. I opened the door to find them standing there, stiff and indignant in their pressed clothes. "Mrs. Grant," Emily's mother said curtly, "we need to talk." I said nothing, just stepped aside and let them in. They didn't sit. They hovered in the center of the room like two hawks circling prey. "You're destroying a family," her father said without preamble. "Do you realize that? You're leaving your own son homeless." "Homeless?" I echoed softly. "They've had years to stand on their own feet." Emily's mother crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is vindictive. You're an elderly woman. Surely you don't need that big house. Why not let them stay? Why not let us stay? We've invested in that home, in renovations." "It's not your home," I said quietly. They both blinked, as if shocked by the evenness of my tone. Emily's father stepped closer. "You could have handled this with dignity, but instead you've made it about revenge." That word made me pause. Revenge? No, this wasn't revenge. This was survival. I straightened my shoulders, meeting their gaze with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "You destroyed this family yourselves the moment you locked me out," I said. Emily's mother's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "You stood in my kitchen, planned my home as if I didn't exist, and when I came back from a simple trip, you watched as your daughter threw my life onto the lawn like trash." "Margaret," her father began, but I cut him off. "No," I said, my voice still low but unyielding. You don't get to lecture me about family, not when you stood by while they erased me from my own. The silence in the room was thick, heavy. For once, they had no argument. Finally, Emily's mother sniffed, her chin raised high. You'll regret this. One day, when you're all alone, you'll wish you'd been more generous. I smiled faintly. I've been generous enough for a lifetime. And with that, I opened the door and gestured for them to leave. As the door clicked shut behind them, I felt no guilt, not even a flicker. They weren't here to make peace. They were here to protect what they thought was theirs. But soon, they'd have nothing left to protect. The papers were already signed. The sale was nearly complete. And in just a few days, Matthew and Emily would receive their official eviction date. This time, there would be no begging, no forgiveness, no more space for people who only saw me as convenient. The pen felt heavy in my hand. I stared down at the contract on Peter's desk, the final papers that would transfer the house to its new owners. For a moment, I hesitated, not because I doubted my choice, but because I could still hear Matthew's little boy voice in my head. When I'm grown up, I'll take care of you, Mommy, I promise. That boy was long gone. In his place stood a man who had locked me out in the rain and watched as his wife tossed my life onto the lawn like it was trash day. I signed my name with a steady hand. Peter slid the papers into his folder with a faint smile. It's done. The house officially belongs to the buyers. A young couple, newly married. They fell in love with the garden. I nodded, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. That house would finally be filled with real love again. Not entitlement, not cruelty. Real love. The eviction notice went out that afternoon. Matthew called me an hour later, his voice cracking like glass. Mom, please, don't do this. We'll pay rent. We'll take care of everything. Just don't throw us out. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the sunlight streaming across the floor. You already threw me out, Matthew, I said softly. That was different, he shouted. We were in a hard place. Emily's parents had nowhere to go, and neither did I said. He fell silent. In the background, I heard Emily sobbing. Tell her we'll make it right. Tell her we'll fix it. My lips curled into a small, sad smile. You can't fix what you broke, I said. Not with apologies, not with promises, not anymore. Mom, please, Matthew whispered. We're family. Family doesn't do what you did. And then I hung up. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, staring out over the quiet street as the last light faded. The house was gone. But so was the weight I'd been carrying for years. The weight of their disrespect, their entitlement, their greed. They had left me with nothing. And somehow, I'd still come out whole. I parked across the street from the house, far enough to stay hidden, but close enough to watch it all unfold. It was moving day. Emily's precious garden party chairs were stacked haphazardly on the curb. Matthew was struggling with a dresser, his face red and streaked with sweat. Emily stood in the driveway, screaming into her phone, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You can't do this to us. You don't understand. This was our home. Ours. The neighbors had gathered quietly, pretending to water plants or check mail, but I could feel their eyes. Every curtain twitched, every head turned. I imagined what they were thinking. Wasn't that Margaret's house? Didn't her son and his wife move in? Why are they being evicted? Emily's parents hovered awkwardly near the moving truck. Her mother's face was pale with embarrassment. Her father's lips were pressed tight as he muttered something that made Emily whirl on him. This is your fault, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You said we'd be fine. You said she wouldn't fight back. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her face. The perfect, polished woman who used to smile sweetly at the neighbors now looked like a cornered animal. I sipped my coffee from the car and watched in silence. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Matthew dropped the dresser onto the driveway with a loud thud. Emily, stop it, he said, his voice hoarse. Just stop. Don't tell me to stop, she screamed. We had it all. That stupid old woman ruined everything. Matthew flinched at her words. Old woman? That's all I was to her. Not a mother-in-law. Not even a person. Just an obstacle she thought she could bulldoze. The young couple who'd bought the house arrived then, stepping out of their car with bright eyes and tentative smiles. Emily's shriek turned into a wail. Oh my God, they're here already? You're not even giving us a chance to breathe? The young woman glanced nervously at her husband, clutching a bouquet of flowers they'd clearly brought as a housewarming gesture. Hi, she said softly. We didn't mean to rush. We were told you'd be out today. Emily spun on her. This isn't your house. The young woman recoiled, clutching the flowers tighter. Matthew put a hand on Emily's shoulder. Enough, Emily. His voice was hollow, defeated. It's over. No, she screamed, yanking away from him. It's not over. She can't just erase us like this. She's evil! Evil! Her voice cracked and then broke completely, dissolving into sobs. The neighbors across the street whispered to each other. One man shook his head slowly and walked back inside. Emily's perfect little world had shattered, and everyone could see the truth now. I set my coffee cup down and opened my car door. It was time to go. As I drove away, I didn't look back. Not at the house. Not at Matthew. Not at Emily screaming on the driveway. That chapter was closed. They thought they could bury me under their greed. But I wasn't buried. I was reborn. And for the first time in years, I felt like Margaret Grant again. Not someone's mother, not someone's burden. Just me. Whole. Unbroken. Free.